Good evening. I have 6:30, and I'm going to call the meeting to order. Mr. David will join us shortly. So let's go on and start with TranSystems street study.
So I loosely titled this Rock and Web transportation study, but I think we've got a little bit looser scope to kind of try and figure out exactly what this looks like as we kind of move forward. And we're not done by any stretch of the imagination. We've kind of been working on trying to do some stuff, but we need to confirm some things with KDOT as we go forward. So this is a little bit preliminary, but at the end of the day, I think we'll kind of get the flavor of what's going on for sure for you all. Let you ask some questions. So I don't know if I can. Yeah, sure. And
Or move the mic up or
move the
something.
mic up. Maybe.
Yeah. Move the
Is
mic
that
up.
better?
That helps. Yes. Yes.
Let me see if I can make this thing advance now. It does work. So I'm going to give a little bit of the project background as we know it, and then talk a little bit about some of the travel patterns and then some of the concept designs that are out there that I think are moving forward at this point. As a project background, as a general map up here of kind of the transportation system in the area, you got 254, Rock and Web, Woodlawn, Greenwich, 53rd, 45th, 37th. They're kind of your main routes, and then everything kind of filters down to K96. So, initially when we started scoping this with Ty, we wanted to concentrate mainly on Rock and Web between 37th and 69th, I think are kind of the limits. But as you start looking at that, those are influenced heavily with K254 and the access along it, as well as what comes kind of out of that with some of the cross streets and things like that. We also kind of just plotted, one of the things, especially in the AM, one of the things that starts kind of coming into play is some of the school systems. There are a number of those kind of just in the area or right outside the area that cause some different travel patterns. A lot of folks will go a lot of times between 45th from one side to the other type of a thing. So it's kind of an interesting route that they've picked there. And then kind of your focal points mainly in the existing transportations are Woodlawn, Web at both 96 and K254, as well as Rock at 96. And then, it still does have quite a bit of, or a moderate amount of traffic up at 254 as well. But the kind of curved system there just north of there in the Willow Bend area kind of cuts down a lot of the through traffic on that road. A lot of people kind of skirt over to Web. So we did pull some streetlight data for this, which is just essentially probe data. People on their phones usually covers about 20% of the folks in the area. We just picked one of the zones kind of in the middle of Bel Aire as kind of the entry point. If you move that around, different people kind of go different directions, but as far as maybe they use Web instead of Rock, in general, your travel patterns kind of stay along that. So if you look at this, Rock was, to the south, a pretty strong draw. And then you kind of see that 45th Street draw kind of showing up there. That's the, let's see if I got a laser pointer here or something I can point at, but go back. That would be the kind of just south of the blue area would be the 45th Street kind of draw that you kind of see as a cutover. People also use that, I think, a lot because of the airport down there. Jabara is kind of cutting off access between Greenwich and there. But that's kind of your through route east-west right now. And again, north-south, Rock or Web, both kind of pull depending on which one of those parcels you start looking at. And if you look, they go mainly west Wichita or mainly south of 96 or along 96. It starts dropping off quite a bit after you get beyond that. So most of your draw is more local, not as much downtown, although there are some trips that still go there. Not as much to the north and not as much to the east. So most of the trips coming in and out of Bel Aire are heavily influenced mainly by 96, 45th, and a little bit of 254 up there to the north. I'm doing this more in here's some constraints and layering on top of each other. So we kind of know those travel patterns. Another thing we start looking at right now, then it would be, are there any real major wetlands or environmental constraints with different species. I checked the species. There were no critical habitats in the area that were identified so far, so that's a good news. They did mention migratory birds, and so there'd still have to be a little bit further study on some of that. But as far as the desktop review we're providing, it looks to be kind of the best information you have available. There are a number of small wetlands, which are kind of the green located, or the ponds, or also estuaries or things like that they really want you to kind of steer clear of, as well as a few streams. But normal type permitting that you would do, not hugely, cumbersome type permitting. Same thing, south end of the project. This is just more developed area, so you wouldn't have as much. But if you look kind of along the rock area, which is kind of in the center of the screen to the left with the green and the blue kind of coming up there, there were a couple of wetlands that got a little bit closer. So if we do have, some widenings or stuff in that area, we'll have to take a little bit of special look at kind of what's going on in that area. Then we, start laying on kind of what's going to happen up here is kind of the next. Oh, you do have a laser pointer. I forgot to bring one. Go back a couple. Like I was saying, that would be your 45th. There's your Rock Road. There's Jabara over here, and you kind of see the pattern going back. And then this would be K96. Like I said, after you drop south, a lot of people just take your arterials going south, but most of your influence, is kind of local, is what I would say. It doesn't really go all the way down to downtown. A lot of it goes out west to west side of town as well. Here's kind of the stream beds. There's a couple little fingers here and there. They seem to be pretty small overall, though, so there's not going to be huge impacts. This is the one area that starts getting a little bit funny down near Willow Bend as well, a little bit in there. Some of those have been identified as wetlands, so those will get a little bit tougher, maybe require some mitigation if we start doing a whole lot in those areas. So then, like I said, we started looking at growth, which I know a few of you I recognize from the K96 meetings we had. We'd taken a hard look at this whole area all the way to the north side of 254. This is kind of the growth influence area for 96 that we used. So luckily we have a lot of this already kind of built in. Wasn't exactly perfect. We had kind of that industrial area in the blue right there, obviously Integra, and at this point we're here in the north side of the road are probably going to be included in some additional development up in that area. So we'll have to kind of revise that a little bit for some of the projections as far as that goes. But this is about a 2080 fill in when we started running the numbers to back into about how long this would take to kind of fill in this whole area. It goes all the way to Butler Road. And again, it's a pretty good influence area. North of there will take a little bit longer to develop, but we did take about a mile north as full development. Again, a lot of this is residential. And when we did our look on 96, much of this growth is kind of the last bastion within 30 minutes of like downtown. So if you draw a little ring around downtown at about a 30-minute window, this is about the only hole left in the whole area. You have to get beyond that 30-minute, which seems to be the kind of the magic window people want. So you're in prime real estate right now. Although there are, a little bit of water, which we talked about with Integra and some other folks, getting the water feeds, which I think Ty is well aware of, and I know I've been working on some of that stuff. Some of the utilities and that type of stuff, making sure they can feed up here starts becoming a little more problematic than historically, but in general, it's not something that can't be overcome either. I think I hit on this growth basically when we plugged all this empty ground in, it triggered about double the volumes on these arterials as you started coming in down here. And then up at the north end, obviously, much bigger growth would be anticipated because the volumes are much lighter than the south end of the corridor. So you'd probably see more than that, but I would say approximately about the same volumes in general once it all fills in. Again, 45th was a kind of a cut through route that was shown. So early in this process, when we were working with Integra a little bit, we kind of went through what if scenario with KDOT and Integra, and Ty, I think, was part of these conversations as well. We did a number of different types of interchange, and this is kind of the setup that they ended up favoring. This is where we're kind of paused a little bit in that, and I'll explain it here. And KDOT hasn't fully confirmed this, and they are wanting to take it to kind of local consult and get some better understanding of some of that. So that's where this gets a little bit fuzzy from this point forward. They want a interchange. Basically, they want to skip over rock at this point, was what they had told us. Namely because the way the Woodlawn interchange is set up, the ramps and stuff start getting into the influence area between the two. And in general, they want to try to keep to the 2 mile corridor spacing, which is what they've really wanted to try establish. They've not been great about it in the urban areas, but it is something that they want to maintain on 254 at this point. So with that said, and there's already a interchange at Woodlawn over here, there would not be ramps at Rock, and there would be at Webb. And so, as you can tell, when you start thinking about things in these terms, that becomes a little bit more problematic as far as you're going to have a little bit of an additional area coming into this than you would when you say looked at like K96 or US 54 or some of those other major freeways that we have around here. You would have a bigger influence area for each one of those interchanges rather than just a mile of feed. You'd get 2 miles the whole way up, back and forth. So what that does is that also makes Webb Road probably a little bit bigger of a roadway than normal. And so that's why this is a little bit more impactful and why we're not quite as far along as we would want to be at this point, because we haven't really fully got this completely confirmed from KDOT. We're still proceeding in this manner. They officially kind of gave us word about a week ago that this is still their preferred option. So at this point, to kind of meet your deadlines that are being required, we're going to move forward along these lines. But the other thing that you'll notice when we start doing things like this, you're obviously going to have a lot more volume on your road that's connected to the to 254 up here. But that also puts a lot more turns on basically your first intersection off of that. So people want to, either go back a mile to Rock, or if they skip over Greenwich, it's going to be the same thing. You have this kind of access road that probably needs to be about a half mile is the first access spacing they'll require, that would run pretty much the whole length wherever they have these double interchanges, or one and then skip over one and then come here, to get that traffic off the system as soon as possible and back over to the other roadway. That's kind of your best bet if this is the kind of access that's going to be required, is to get, as soon as you can, have another spot where people can get either over to Greenwich or over to Rock if they want to. And then the same thing from the Woodlawn side, kind of connect that up. So as you think back to the kind of that first map that I brought up, I think my other animations came along with it. So as you start looking at that from the big picture, you can start seeing what kind of sense that gives you, that circulatory pattern. And if you don't put those in, you're going to end up putting them down to the next nearest road, so 53rd. And you're picking up that much more traffic, and you're building, bigger roadways that much farther south too. So that's kind of the idea currently, to kind of match with their concepts. But we're still, like I said, finalizing those numbers and making sure, but that's the current status based off of kind of what we've got pulled together so far.
Just a quick question on that. New roads are expensive. Roads are expensive to maintain. My first thought was, of course, people would just go down to 53rd and use that to kind of connect between the two. What's the disadvantage to that?
You're going to need a bigger roadway for that extra half mile on every one of those roadways. If you don't,
so Webb and Rock,
it's going to get wider.
Need to be widened if you do that.
Yeah, for farther. And so then the other route is, say you live up in, let's pick on that residential neighborhood on the west side of Rock right there. You're going to have to get off, come all the way down to 53rd and then back up. So the same thing somewhat. I think Integra's got some plans to pull off. But if you don't have this here, then you might be getting off at Woodlawn, coming down 53rd and coming back up too.
Okay.
So you're also putting a lot more traffic on 53rd, which has the 2 schools on it, which was the other thing that we started kind of, maybe this isn't a good idea. But that was kind of our initial thought too, was keep it on the arterial. But then as we started looking at it, I think these mid-mile roads make a little more sense because you can make them what you want them to be.
How much of that traffic would be carried by frontage roads along 254?
Currently, they don't want frontage roads along 254, the last we heard from KDOT.
If they change that, how would that influence these
You
roads?
may not need these. That's why we haven't gotten a lot farther than we have.
Okay.
So these would, in a sense, be replacing frontage roads along.
So you're
254.
saying that Consult push for frontage roads.
I'm agnostic. I just want an answer, I guess, is what I would tell you. You can make, honestly, you could make a frontage road system work. You can make a system like this work. It's really about figuring out the balance and what's right for all the parties involved is what I would tell you.
The city has right of way, I think, that is reserved along there for frontage road, if I recall. Is that correct? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Both for the frontage road and these additional roads, or
No, just for the frontage
just
road.
frontage roads?
Yeah.
So the right of way of these roads hasn't been secured
Right.
at all.
But we've had conversations with the developer because he's aware of the possibility of this road instead of a frontage road. And he said that we could just switch the right of way. So he would give us the right of way for this road, and then we would vacate the right of way for a frontage
For
road.
his development, but there's other properties involved in that.
At other location, you mean
To
farther?
the east of Webb.
the
Keachai
east and-
has some involvement both
Mhm.
north and west of that
Yep.
Rock Road interchange.
And
With those new east-west roads, would they be 2-lane or 4-lane? Just 2 lanes?
we haven't identified it. My gut's more in that 3 lane, so you'd have turn lanes, but you wouldn't necessarily have to do that the whole way. But it also depends, there's a lot of intensity that they kind of have planned for this site too. So if you can suck off, with a right in, right out, like at a quarter-mile line is going to be the first access point that KDOT will allow. And then at the half-mile line is the first full access point. So that's where you can have left turns going the opposite way. So what really influences this is really when you start looking at these in conjunction with each other, right? If I just looked at this site and I didn't care about anything, this wouldn't be that big of an impact. But what that really does is it forces Woodlawn and Webb and 127th, I think is the next one over here. Well, Greenwich would be skipped over too if they stick to the same thing, is what I'm thinking. So that's where I'm coming, is you'll need some sort of an access to replace that typical what you would do with the frontage road system like you were talking. So
So to follow up, 53rd could be an option. You're just
Could be.
not saying it's the preferred option.
yeah,
Webb's already a 4-lane road. So what you're suggesting is Rock maybe a little bit wider potentially. Maybe Webb gets widened a little bit more for turn lanes if you used 53rd versus something at half mile.
right. And again, your turns become what I'll say, I won't say problematic's probably not the right word, but I'll use it in this sense, because you're going to get a lot of people wanting to either come back this way or go this way for a ways, right? And so what you're really doing is you're introducing turns at that first point. So you're talking big intersections too, like double lefts all the way around, things like that. So your intersections get big. And so trying to keep that, and again, access management, things like that become very important, or you're not going to be able to get, if you have a bunch of driveways, in this section along the roadway, that traffic's not going to be able to function. It's just going to be locked up if you're going to 53rd. So again, that's the idea, is if you can get that limited to that first half mile, and make this more of some people call them backage roads and things like that. Make it more of a backage road system, you can get it to work. So that's the idea though. But you got to have some way to get the people, again, you're feeding a 2-mile influence area for each one of these. So you've got to get them back or forward, depending on which direction they're going on 254 to those.
What is KDOT's objection to having the frontage roads?
When we had the conversation with them, the objection just was that they built a lot of frontage road. We know that's how 54 was built. We want to really look at instead looking at a backage system and pulling the traffic off our system onto that backage system for the commercial development and things like that. I never heard a good solid reason unless somebody, Ty, have you? They didn't really give us a
Yeah,
very
that's
solid reason as to the why on that. It was more of
Is
the
Pull up
preference.
the one with the interchange.
Is KDOT responsible for the frontage road if we had one?
Typically not. Historically, City of Wichita on 54 is responsible for all
It
of
doesn't
those.
make any difference money wise. They just don't like the idea this week.
Is it congestion of the interchange?
It's
Yeah.
separation, I think. Yeah, I think Brett's right. I think to try to get a frontage road system to work, obviously, well, I won't say obviously, but a DDI doesn't work then because you can't have a through movement with it. But it's just a different way of kind of handling the traffic at the end of the day.
I was just about to ask that. Does it have anything to do with KDOT wanting to do diverging diamonds?
It's a more efficient interchange and it's a safer interchange. So yeah, I think that might play into it a little bit. Andover for that next couple of miles and along US 54 did have they're actually planning both. The planning side of this, backage road systems tend to be for the community's traffic. So having a good circulation around the highway, the frontage road systems tend to be more for people getting off the highway and the highway traffic, say going to a commercial business or something like that. So if you're living in this area and you want to come up over here, a lot of times you'll still take the back way in or one of these drives. A lot of times you don't come up to that frontage road. And so you see that even along 54 now, if there's access from the back, a lot of the neighborhoods or the people that live there will come in from those other alternative ways to come in there. So it's just different ways to access the same system. I won't say one's better or one's worse. It's just, that's the way of the system, so to speak.
Because the concern I have with it is it's an extra mile for us to build and maintain when 53rd could be replaced and improved is sort of my worry that we're adding an extra mile or two to our system that we have to maintain.
In a way, I feel like you may not even be able to do it on that road south of that road 254 because of the Keachai has a development in there, a housing development in there. And that may be cutting right by it or cutting through it. I don't know which.
And there may be some alternatives here without the interchange here. We might be able to cut up here and then do something like that to kind of pull in there. Don't think that it honestly has to be 100% all the way back there. The connection off the interchange has to be back here. This connection could be closer because there's no ramps or anything coming in there. So when I say a half-mile line, that's where it has to hit here. It can.
Yeah, when you come south and west of Rock,
Yes.
that's a housing development in there. It's already developed. There's
Right.
no place, as far as I know, there's no place there to put any backing road.
And that's kind of why we were looking right in here because we thought we could maybe fit it right through that area.
Okay.
Yeah, but that doesn't go back to Woodlawn then.
It does.
You don't have it in your pictures.
No, I didn't draw it all the way out to Woodlawn because again, this is kind of a newer confirmation we've got. The hard part gets in over here too because of the ponds and stuff, but something like that maybe would be kind of the alignment. Again, somewhere in there, there's going to be a road is kind of the idea. As it ties in, we could pick a good spot, but without tying down the landowner and things like that, we need to probably be a little bit flexible as far as where those limits of what that could be.
On the east side, just to clarify, you were also assuming that Greenwich is not going to be a full interchange
At this point,
at this point.
that was the last conversations we had. Again, they want to take that to more public consult of sorts. So they couldn't give us a straight answer.
Did you see in your, and I know you just did a cell phone traffic study, right?
Yep.
Did you see an increase in traffic along Greenwich at any point north or south of 254? I can't tell which is Greenwich in that.
Greenwich would be this one over here.
Okay.
I know Greenwich has a pretty good usage because it does run all the way north and then circle Greenwich down there. So you get a lot of traffic from the east coming to the school. In fact, my kids go to that school, so I drive that one every morning. But I don't think there's been a huge increase per se. I can go look at that with our probe data though.
Well, the reason I brought it up is because at the consult that they had in Newton, there was a lady who said she lives just a few miles north of there on Greenwich, and she says it backs up to 254 all the time. I don't know if that's just because of traffic or if
So-
there's that much more traffic.
I
or
know
if
the
it's
answer
just
to
what it
this one
is.
actually.
Okay.
Butler Road was under construction. They redid the north side of Butler Road.
So it's driving traffic over to Greenwich.
So it drove traffic over
Okay.
there. So right
All
over
right.
here.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
Okay.
So Greenwich is one of the only asphalt streets. It goes up to what, Furley, I think. And so this one runs all the way up into Harvey County. I can't think of the road it hits up there and then it tees off, but they're the only two blacktop roads that run north in that stretch of the county. So if you live anywhere north of here, you're probably going to come south on one of those roads. And with this one closed basically from here up to is the north, almost the North County line. I think it was shifting a lot of people over there.
Okay.
So
That makes more sense now. I did not know
yeah,
that. but okay.
she probably did pick up. I wouldn't say, I mean, there was people there in the mornings that would back up, but it wasn't significantly different, I wouldn't think, than a year or so ago. But
Okay.
that also was closed for nine months, I want to say.
Mhm.
So, but that was the other cutover up to like Whitewater or anything like that. If you ever wanted to go up there, or 196. So probably what's going on there.
I'm sorry, I
I
didn't.
said that was probably what was going on
Oh,
there
okay.
anyway.
All right.
I won't say there might not be something else too.
Okay, thank you.
So any other questions, updates?
I did have one question. So you talked a little bit about some of the things you're considering on using 53rd Street versus adding that road at the half-mile line versus using the frontage roads, and how KDOT's still thinking about, where the intersections are going to go. With a plan and a project like this, can you help us understand what decisions will the city ultimately make versus what decisions will KDOT make here?
I would say you have at least some sort of, I mean, Ty may be better at this, but I think you still have input on how this all looks. That's not saying that KDOT won't override it on their highway. Outside of this area, I think anything else is up to you all, 100%. But the access to the K254 would be something that's on them. They get to decide that one.
So in your-
Interchange type, that type of stuff. Again, you can you can give them feedback. They want your input. If you really don't want it,
But in terms of if we want to put a frontage road there, that's a city decision because that's the city right of way. If we want to put the road at the half-mile line, that's something the city will decide. Or if we just want to make 53rd the street, that'd be the city decision as well.
That is correct to a certain extent. They will likely, when they put this interchange in, buy the access control back as far as they want it. So they may still buy access control along the property to not mess with their interchange, if that makes sense.
They may like acquire right of way. Okay.
So,
They
if you
would,
take,
they
if
would
you-
acquire your, so that's what I'm getting to is they'll force your connection back along the roadway.
Okay.
so if you take away
Typically,
KDOT's input and our input here, you, in your opinion, if you were just doing this without anybody else's influence, what would you prefer?
you know, I like to think of things in those terms a lot of times when I start. What's the right, you're asking what the right thing to do, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And like I said, I think to me, both systems will work. It really comes down to how you want to use the ground. And again, I still think you can make a system work here. I don't think without redoing Woodlawn, you could put an interchange at Rock.
Yeah, I agree.
With this trumpet, your aux lane's already down here. You're really not going to have a good chance to get people on and that weave distance and all that. And I've seen too many crashes because of that. This isn't a good setup. So I'd say timeline wise, that excludes Rock from having an interchange, right?
Right.
Okay. So then I come down here and I say, well, that definitely means you need one at Webb because otherwise you're going to be going 3 miles and that's really not good, right?
That's not good.
So Webb probably should be the spot where we have an interchange. Now, the frontage roads, like I mentioned, when you put those in, they're for commercial, but you have no way to connect it over, right? So to me, I see why they're getting to a backage system on this then, if you start along those thought processes. Now, where that occurs, if you don't want it at the mid-mile line, you want it at 53rd, we can make something work there. That's where it gets a little fuzzy in my book is the supporting system. You can make a lot of these things work different ways. Again, my initial thought is, why are you building, an extra half mile of extra wide roadway to make people turn? And then if you develop anything in these areas, they're going to have to come back into it, right? So I guess from that perspective, if that helps you at all, I don't think frontage roads help if you can't get an access point here. So that's where I'm coming. Like I kind of see the overall system. Now, if you want a frontage road system, I think you got to start it back at Woodlawn and find a way to push it in the back of those homes and take it all the way through like you do down at 54. And I don't know that these folks would like it. I think the same thing kind of here, this trumpet, you can't push a frontage road like you typically would, a one-way frontage road through there, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it's not gonna work
So
there.
to me, frontage roads up here aren't going to help you a whole lot. And you need a really strong support system, whether that's up here at the half-mile line or 53rd. I think from your guys' perspective, you can make all of them work. To me, it becomes, if you get farther and farther away, that's that much farther people have to travel back then.
No, I think that makes sense. If you're for a frontage road to work, it kind of has to run the whole length of 254. And if that's not possible, then why would you do it?
Yep. That's
That
I
makes sense.
I guess the rest of the pieces to me are interchangeable after that, like what type of interchange you have here, whether you take that all the way down. Those are all, you can make them all work. It's more about finding the most efficient way to spend your guys' money at that point. And I think that's your all's decision, because you might want to spend a little bit more money now and improve 53rd and make that kind of the way rather than acquire right away and, force people different ways along a mid-mile. Mid-mile lets you have a little bit better kind of flow around what I would say is going to be the commercial area. you know, tends to be about the first half mile or so, first mile to half mile around a roadway. If you look back at, let's go to,
If we
Next
put
one.
a road in at the half mile, it's going to be strictly commercial because there's nothing south of it that's going to connect.
Slade, a
It's
quick,
already been platted out to not connect north.
Slade, a quick question. Is there a way to split the difference? And what I mean by that is if we improved 53rd and there is a backage road, but it's not necessarily on the half mile line. Maybe it's like an industrial park feeder road.
Yep.
Like, would that help? Like, could we do both? Like, make sure that feeder road was supported enough?
Yeah.
But isn't necessarily a main arterial. It would be more of a, hey, this serves the industrial park, but it's a bigger.
yeah, I mean, that's a possibility. However that lays in here. In fact, that was one of the concepts they came up with their site. They ended up liking this one a little bit more because it gave them more site building room up here. The other thing I'll tell you is, again, KDOT's pretty adamant about that half mile spacing for a full access. They'll do right in, right outs before that, but to get that full complete access, you gotta go to that half mile line. And they've gotten more and more stringent about that over time, simply because, again, if you go up to Kansas City or a number of other areas, that first half mile just becomes a barrier once it develops.
Yeah.
So
So what is that diagonal along the bottom of that screen? Is that a pipeline?
that is I forget what type of pipeline, fuel pipeline that runs
Okay.
through there.
All right. I just want to make sure that that's what I was looking at.
I
Thank
think
you.
there's high voltage power lines at that half mile
Mhm.
mark there too. So I don't know
Yes.
how exactly close you have to be to the half mile, but do you see that being an issue?
No, I think as long as we're in the neighborhood and there's, a utility easement or something right there, I think they'll work with you, but they want it near that. I mean, they're not going to quibble over 500 feet. They'll
Okay.
quibble over, 1,000.
You said they were getting more specific about that, so I wondered.
Yeah, no, I think, there's still things that they'll negotiate on depending on the types of access and what the development's going to be. But for the most part, they're going to want it near that half mile line probably. Again, we could come up with other types of option, but to fit what they want, that would be the first place that you would go, I guess.
Well, the other thing too, it's important to remember that this does serve that development. And so we've made the developer aware that they'll have to pay for that because that serves their development. And they'll do it on special assessments or something like that. So really, that's not a piece you'll have to worry about. It's where do you want that road? And really the developer seems okay with it being on the south like that. And that's why it kind of curves through. But I think, obviously during the plating process, you'll have some input on that.
So much of this engages Keachai. Have you had much conversation with Keachai about any of this?
We had one conversation early on as we started the study. We talked about this option. They were not very much in favor of it. I would say would be the takeaway I got, Ty, right? They basically had planned some of their infrastructure and water lines specifically to feed some things. And again, I'd say that's probably our biggest hang up, and KDOT, I don't think, wants to necessarily commit without further public comment. So.
Is it safe to say that they want to interchange at Rock?
That was what I heard that day anyway.
So can Rock a 3-lane or?
In this scenario, yeah, I think there's not going to be enough traffic on it. You won't probably have to develop it the whole way. I'd just key spots you'd put turn lanes in probably. If you want to for, fire access or emergency stuff, you could do a 3-lane the whole way. But you wouldn't necessarily have to. I think further south of there, the same thing, Willow Bend area, probably put turn lanes in where the residential is. We'd look at kind of what sort of control and the volumes coming through there. But if you don't have the interchange up north, it's simply probably traffic going up to the schools and Integra and things like that from the residential areas. So you're probably going to be able to handle that with a 3-lane. And again, that's why we're not farther, because if you put an interchange at Rock, this completely changes everything we've done.
Yeah.
So
If I remember right, when we started this, there was a legislative deadline of some sorts that we were trying to hit with this study completion.
There's a consult next Thursday here in Wichita at the Metroplex, WSU Metroplex.
So I was just going to ask, what were the next steps kind of with this study?
I would definitely, if you want to talk about funding for this whole area, they did have one shown at the, what was it, the local console it was the Newton console, but it was for the more rural aspects. They went ahead and showed this project and they had $50 million budgeted for this, which would approximate what this cost is, I would say. And from that, that's what I would tell you is that they are putting this on at least the talking points. So it'd be good to at least go talk to them about that. As far as the access and stuff like that goes, I'd probably do that in a separate meeting with KDOT directly. But if you want to raise, like I said, when you get into technical details, that's probably not what the local consult's more. It's more about we support the 254 improvements from Woodlawn to, Greenwich or whatever you want to call it. And I think that would probably be, and then say, we'd like to have some other conversations with you about you want to change those access locations and things like that. I do think, like I said, if you want to, Keachai wants to push for Rock, I would say that starts to become problematic if you don't do something with Woodlawn too, which means you're probably taken out of business on the west side. So, there's kind of a chain reaction with these things when you start looking at them. Like I said, you can't look at just one, you got to look at the whole system and figure it all out.
Yeah. Well, that's good information. I appreciate that.
So thank you.
Anybody
And
else?
thank you for the opportunity to present.
Anybody else have more questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
You all.
Appreciate it. Next item is the gravel roads report, and I see that we've got looks like a timeline here. I haven't read it. I just saw it. But Marty, you want to talk about that?
Basically, all we've done since we started this project is I've just put together a couple notes. It shows you when we started it, the first time we graded it, how it's held up, and get this paper real quick. So May 19th is when we started the project. Put the blade down, graded, took all the rock off and started putting down the hard rock. We went all the way until August 8th is when we actually had to touch the road for the first time for the 1-inch rock that we put down. The rock's holding up pretty good. It's pushed to the side of the road a little bit, not a whole lot. Haven't had any complaints. I've been waiting to hear from the committee on this waiting for them to call me and say, hey, get out here and grade this. We're having problems, nothing. I haven't heard anything. So I've just been letting it ride and waiting to hear from them. So graded it one time, and now they want, their recommendations are, I guess, wanting to go back through there, remove the KG lime rock again, like we did on the first sample. And then basically the only difference they want to do this time is put down 1 inch of rock, let it get beat down, and then come back 2 weeks later and put another layer of 1 inch rock on top of it instead of putting 2 inches at one time like we did the last time.
This would be in the rest of that area?
Correct.
Okay.
And
In your experience and opinion, what do you think you think this is a good option? I mean, if the citizens are happy with it, that's a big win, but.
you know, that's kind of why I've been waiting to hear from the gravel committee to see what their thoughts are. And, you know, on this paper, they put down, you know, they've had some problems with, you can't roll a stroller across there. You can't ride a bike across it.
Mhm.
Well, we knew this before we went into this. It's a 1-inch rock. We knew this was going to happen.
Right.
Riding a motorcycle down that, I'm sure that's going to be an issue too, you know. Maybe by doing the 1-inch rock, like the 1-inch layer first and letting it get packed down, or it says, if the city, would prefer having a roller, well, that cost us what, $1,500, I think, the last time for a day and a half, 2 days. We did 2 sections. So, but I kind of thought the committee was going to be up here to talk about this tonight and give their thoughts or whatever. So,
Was there a specific reach out to the committee to be here tonight?
No, I just, Ted had said that you wanted to discuss it on the workshop tonight, so I just put it
That's the
on.
reason I got it put on there. Okay.
my thoughts are it's holding up pretty well. If that's what the city wants to do on this, we'll do it. I mean, we'll put down the 1-inch rock. So far, it looks pretty good. I mean, I don't know if you guys have driven down it and looked at it. It's holding up pretty good. There's a lot less dust than what it was a year or 2 years ago.
Marty, I did have a question.
Uh-huh.
So do you think it's necessary to remove, I have driven it and actually walked it over the weekend.
Right.
Obviously it's really loose
Yeah.
because of the type of rock it is and because it doesn't have any fines in it. And that's why people can't ride a stroller. Running on it would be kind of difficult. You'd probably trip a lot easier. Driving on it is a little bit more difficult. Even in a vehicle, you slow down, which is not I'm not saying that's a bad thing.
Yep.
But do you think it's necessary to remove the KG&E limestone and road gravel? Like that's the base. Do
Okay.
you think that's absolutely necessary, especially if they're wanting this 1-inch rock to get pushed into the ground?
Right.
I can't think of a better way to get that done than to put it.
Well, let's put it this way. We got the road right now where it's level with the sides of the road. So the water runs off the road into the
Ground.
ditches.
Yeah, yeah.
So if we were to put the 1-inch rock on
You'd
top of
build
that
it up
right now,
higher.
it's going to be higher. So where's the rock going to go?
Sure.
Right into
Yeah,
the
just
ditch.
it was
So-
just more for your
What
keeping
we
it in
did was
place.
cut about 2 inches down on the last test sample. And so once we cut that down, put the 1-inch rock on it, it basically put it in a trough
Gotcha.
and holds the rock in place.
Kind
And
of wedged it in there.
it kind of held up. So that was my recommendation. That's
Yeah.
why I think this way, same way, cut down about 2 inches, put down 1 inch of rock on it, let it. And I don't know about traffic rolling it or if we need to do a roller. I mean,
Sure.
I don't know who pays for that or whatever. That's why I said, rolling would be the best to do if they want to do that and then get it packed in and then come back in, what'd they say, 2 weeks and add another 1 inch of rock on top of it. So my recommendation would be cut it down, put 1 inch of rock on it, get a roller, roll it, and let it set for a little bit and let them look at it, and then put another 1 inch of rock and then let the traffic hit that and see what happens.
Gotcha.
You wouldn't roll it the second time?
I don't think I would because I think you're just going to push it down further. And after I think your first inch of rock and you put your second rock on there, your second inch, I think it's going to interlock, maybe push it down and lock into each other. And that might help it a little bit. It might be a lot tighter than what this first sample was.
Also, rolling it a second time improves or if you rolled it more than once, you're likely to start pulverizing it and it's going to start turning to dust.
That's it.
And so, I mean, with any rock we put down, it will eventually start to degrade. It's just the way it is.
Yep.
But this, I thought it looked great. I mean, I've been out on it. I actually knocked some doors and heard from some citizens that thought it was a good improvement. So I'm in favor of it.
Okay.
If Marty's in favor of it and thinks he can maintain the road in an adequate fashion with the product that they've tested.
Marty, I know it's only been about 4 months and you haven't seen the whole year of the seasons, but do you see it being a little less maintenance once it gets set in place than current dirt roads?
As of what I've seen so far,
Yeah.
yeah, we've touched it one time. I mean, that's it. We haven't had to go out there once a week or after it rains, we have to go out there and then again and again and again. So yeah, I believe it's it's a little better than what we've had out there. But the only concern is, as I have, is the loose rock and their concerns. You can't roll a stroller across it. You can't roll a bicycle across it. Is it going to pack? I can't answer that. I've never used this 1-inch hard rock before. That's what they recommend us use, so that's what we went with. And you know, if something comes down to it and they want it packed more, maybe we find something to add to that rock to give it some fines in it and roll on top of that. Maybe that creates a stable base. I believe one of the guys I talked to at the road committee was talking about adding some kind of chemical that they spray over the top of it, and it binds the rock together. I don't want to speak too much about that because that's not my deal. That's their deal. I think they were going to bring that up or whatever. That's why I thought they were going to be here to talk about this. But I don't know. Time's going to tell, I guess. Time to tell everything. But that's a lot of money for time to tell too. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Can you tell how fast that rock's getting ground down to smaller particles? Is that something you can gauge? Because the
It doesn't
question
look-
then becomes, how long until we end up with another road that's all fine sand and we have to tear it out and start over again?
Yeah. 3, 4, 5. Well, 5-6 months, it hasn't broke down very much at all. So maybe we get a year, we look at it again. Maybe we wait a little longer on the second phase of this. Maybe we'll wait until the middle of the next year to get into this. See how it holds up. I mean, that would be my thoughts. Maybe we give it another 6 months and then we look at it and go, yeah, we don't really like this, or yeah, this is holding up great. And then we finish the rest of the roads that way. And then we maintain the KG rock that's down there right now as it is. We just keep maintaining it like we've been doing. So
I like that idea personally of giving it a little more time before we
Or we do
go
something
everywhere
more.
with it.
Yeah, I don't think 6 months is a good test on a road.
right.
Yeah.
That's kind of was my concerns too.
No heavy rains or anything like that.
We've had some heavy rains on it.
We've
We've
had
had the
water,
water
maybe.
actually go across the road and back across in front of Bro's house there. Goes all the way across the road. And I was expecting to go back over there and see all the rock gone. No, it was still in the same place and it held up. So I was really surprised with that. So because we had to go over there before when the KGE rock was there and build the road back up.
Wash it out. So that's a good segue into the drainage issue. I know we did a drainage study of that area. What's the thought on, you got any thoughts on doing anything with the drainage in that area?
I believe we were talking about doing a little bit over there. I don't remember who was over there that we talked to.
So we've got Garver doing the Parkwood road study, or not the road study, but they're designing the road
paving,
because of
right.
that paving improvement
Mhm,
district. So we did request them to add an alternate into those bid documents for the drainage work over there for replacing the culverts,
Okay.
as well as for digging the ditches out. That will come before council probably either late this year or early next year. And then you can decide how you want to go forward with that. If you want to go forward with having the contractor do that, or if you want to have our staff go through. My suggestion is if our staff goes through and does it, we pick maybe 1/5 of the overall area to do each year. That way we can, every year we're doing 1/5 of that area, kind of pick. And we did ask, pick the worst areas so we can start there. Granted, we have to start at the bottom and work back to the top of the drainage area, but just kind of working through that with the Gravel Roads Committee. I don't believe we actually have heard back from them on where they would prefer us to start,
Mhm.
but
I think they're
that's-
officially disbanded now. Is that correct?
Yeah, they were short term to produce a report,
Mhm.
and that's what they did. So
So we have the
Yeah.
report. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, I like your suggestion that we look at Garver, seeing about the total package there, and maybe that's the right solution.
Yeah.
We'll see when we get it.
hopefully.
Any other questions concerning the gravel road?
I was just going to say my thoughts on this. Glad that folks are happy with the results. Seems like this is a comparable cost to what we would typically spend maintaining the roads. I don't see a reason not to do this. I think that's great. When I've driven down it personally, the dust has felt about the same to me, just looking behind my car and making the transitions. I was surprised that folks thought that it was an improvement, because that wasn't my observation, but I don't live there.
Well, you
And
might have
it's-
rode down it the day that we graded it, because when we graded it the first time, it did roll some smoke across there. But after it set for a while, it seemed to look a lot better. I mean, it's not that the dust is not there. It's just not as bad as having the KG rock.
But I did notice that you couldn't really drive on it at full speed. If you were doing full speed on that road, you were sliding all over the place. It was
Right.
like driving on snow and ice.
Right.
It was how I felt about it in my car.
Well, maybe
Problem
that's what
solved.
they think
Probably
too.
depends on what you're driving.
So,
I didn't have any trouble driving it at 30 miles an hour, but my car's, 4-wheel drive anti-slip. So that may have made a difference. But I too noticed that I didn't think the dust was any different. I thought it was just as bad. So unless we just happen to go on the same day.
I've driven it a few times, probably not within the last couple of weeks, but at the end of the day, similar cost, better results for the folks that live there. I don't think it's a bad deal to do it. So,
Yep.
Okay.
I do kind of wonder if that's going to be the strategy and composition of gravel roads, if we should just consistently apply that to all of them in the city, the ones that aren't getting remediated, so that we have kind of one set of way that we're maintaining the roads. I don't know if that's anything you've thought about, just like one set of aggregate that we maintain, and one cadence for managing that. Seems like there might be some value and consistency there.
Yeah, what if we put the 1-inch rock on top of the KG&E mix?
It would pack down and do that. I was thinking, if we did something like that, we just maybe add the road gravel to the top of the rock, if it's, and that might give it a little bit of stability. I haven't tested that. I'm just throwing out some thoughts there, anything to try to get that rock to bind together and stop slipping and rolling. And after we grade it, 3, 4, 5 times, who knows, that might bring some aggregate up to the top of it, and it might tighten up a little bit. That's why I personally don't think this is enough time to look at the road. So,
Yeah, let's give this some more time. I think that's a good suggestion, and make
on,
sure it's the right thing.
on Justin, on your question is, if we use that on all the roads, this Northridge sand is the only place that I know that we can get this 1-inch hard rock. So, and it's not in town. It's like a couple of hours from here where they get it from. So it's not like I can just call up somewhere local and say, hey, I need a load of it because I got a washout or something like that. So we would have to have a stockpile, which is what they recommend having anyway. I don't know. Could run into a lot. Could run into something perfect. It's all at questions right now. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, because I know there's like Hillcrest, north
Right.
45th Street, and a couple other small areas that are still gravel roads. So I don't know. You just might want to consider if that's what we're going to do down in Aurora Park. Maybe we just buy enough to do it everywhere, rent the roller once, and get it done, and then that be the material that we keep on hand with Public Works. I don't know.
I agree.
Any more questions concerning gravel roads and what the task force has provided us? Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate the information, and didn't know we had the timeline. So great, thanks. The next item is legal. So Maria, sign codes. Are you going to teach us sign language?
Just the codes.
Just the
Just
codes.
the codes, not sign language. Well, good evening, everyone, and I'm really glad to talk to you tonight about our sign code. I know that this is going to be part 2, but let me start off first saying that,
Are you speaking in the microphone?
yes, thank you. I know that you all know about that the right of free speech is protected under the First Amendment, but I want to say it out loud. I want to say it out loud because there may be residents here, there may be someone watching, But we understand as a community that the First Amendment protects signs as speech. Last year, you guys had almost a 2-hour conversation about the sign code. It was brought to your attention that there are some obsolete references, some outdated references in the sign code. So it was thought it's time to go ahead and update it. In addition to that, there's always new cases and the case law, the goalposts keep changing. So for that reason too, the sign code definitely needs to be looked at and reviewed and updated whenever it can be. On this specific, let me go back to this one. For this specific workshop tonight, what I was going to do was talk about government speech, asking you what your thoughts are on adding a severability clause, continue what the discussion was about reducing restrictions on temporary signs, and then also talking about illuminated signs. Why do I want to talk about the government speech? Because when I watched your workshop from last year, there were a few comments about directional signs, a little bit about governments, and I just want to make sure that you understand that there's a very big difference between government speech and the sign code. The American Planning Association, when it comes down to International Sign Association, they will tell you that it is in the best interest of every local government to know the difference between the sign code and government speech. If there's a monument outside of City Hall and it says Bel Aire City Hall, that is government speech. If there's a sign at a park and that sign says no loitering, that is another example of government speech. Traffic control devices along the highway sharing a message that there's an accident ahead, avoid the left lane. All of that is government speech. Why is that so important? Because those government signs are on public property and they're communicating public messages. Government speech is completely different than that we are focusing on in the sign code. Those are analyzed in a completely different manner. I just wanted to make sure you knew that. And then going on to the one definition in our sign code is the definition of governmental sign. This definition, I won't read it out loud to you, but it's the exact same definition that the unified government of Wyandotte County has. In fact, as far as all of the other municipalities in the state, that's the only other jurisdiction I can find that is close to ours, but theirs is word for word what we have. Now, other jurisdictions have updated their definition. When they updated it, they included more languages such as government bodies, government agencies, government entities, because they're also bringing into account public utilities, railways, EMS services. They're bringing into the fact that some of those municipalities even have to consider historical locations, that they have to take into account that there's historical signs. Even if those signs are not erected and not placed into a ground, the mere authorization of them get mentioned in some of their definitions. So is it possible we could update our governmental sign definition? Absolutely. But I just wanted to bring that to your attention. There's a big difference. And at least for tonight, I'm talking about residential primarily. Going back to the American Planning Association, the International Sign Code Association, they feel for municipalities because the sign code can truly cause a lot of issues. And one of the things they recommend any municipality to have is a severability clause. We don't have one. So I would suggest and propose to the council that we add one. And it's easy, super easy to do. That simply means hopefully we don't ever get sued, but if we were and a portion of our code was declared unconstitutional, invalid, the severability clause says, fine, that portion you found invalid, but the rest of it is okay. And right now we don't have that. So if the council is okay with that, that is something that we can proceed with and get started sooner rather than later. So that's step one. The next part of your discussion from last year was all about how do we reduce restrictions on temporary signs? And there were a lot of questions about what are other municipalities doing? How are they handling this? Because when the council looked at our process, and our process is, I brought it with me, is to have a resident fill out a permit form and then 2 different site plans. Well, I assume 2 copies of a site plan. Then they also need to be very clear about getting their number, putting it on their sign. There is no fee, but it is a process. In fact, this specific form even tells you which one to do first, 1, 2, 3, and follow. And I know the council was concerned about how can we make that easier, which is perfectly appropriate. So when I looked at other jurisdictions and then I looked at our application, other jurisdictions do have something that we don't. They have a list of signs that do not require permits. They have what they call exemptions. So I'm wondering if that's step 2 for the council. We focus on the severability clause and then we start building the list of exceptions. All of the municipalities around us have started at least a basic list. And before I show you some examples for that, I want to just do a reminder that anything that we do with the sign code has to be very thoughtful, thought out. It has to be tailored regulations to address any issues that we have. Local sign regulations absolutely can lead to lawsuits. Everything must be content neutral. Those are the 2 words, content neutral. And we focus on the physical characteristics, but if you have to read the sign in order to decide how to treat that sign, we're already going a bad direction. And you just have to think about time, place, and manner. So content neutral is what we're looking for. And that's what you talked about. You absolutely talked about that the last time. Time, place, and manner. Those are content neutral limitations. So now that we've just did a rebrief of that, especially for anyone watching tonight, we can go ahead and start looking at the exceptions that I threw together.
So can I ask you a question about this content neutral? So somebody puts a vulgar sign out in their yard. I mean, there are obscenity laws in place, but I don't know if they could be applied to the signs. But should that not qualify? I mean, I know it's a bit subjective, and the Supreme Court has even said that it's subjective, but it's a community standards issue. So I just curious about something that becomes obscene, that you don't want that sign out there, right?
There are a few municipalities, and when I say few, I can think of 3 that they included in their sign code restrictions telling citizens that your signs cannot have obscene subject matter, an obscene message. In addition to that, those municipalities also included a restriction of not to be posting misinformation on their sign as well, both of which are not protected. But for one thing, regarding the obscenity, there's what one neighbor may think is obscene may not be to the other. So all of that would have to be taken into account. The only thing that we could do is add that as a restriction, and we could reference what the Supreme Court has used as the definition. That way we're not making the definition ourselves, but we're putting it with that. That's a possibility.
Okay. I'd like to pursue that.
Okay.
Just so that we
Let me
don't,
write that down.
because I know that I saw some of the examples there, and I thought they bordered on the obscene portion. Maybe they weren't, but maybe they sure bordered on it. So.
Okay. I'm sorry, this is so small. I put too much on one slide. The first exception that municipalities seem to agree about are the government signs. We are not filling out permits, and we are definitely not providing site plans. So that seems easy. The second one that most municipalities agree on are flags. Now we get into time, place, manner. What about quantity? How many flags? does a residential lot get less? Does a commercial lot get more? What I've seen consistently across the board are that municipalities are looking at residential districts and saying 2 flags, 1 flagpole. And then for commercial, larger lots, 3 flags, 3 flagpoles. I'm not saying that this council should do that or not, but that's something for you to consider. That if you do include flags, you can be silent, but the sign code and others do say to try to avoid as much vagueness and ambiguity as possible. You could definitely use this. It's been used with multiple municipalities in the state of Kansas. The other part is incidental signs in residential zoning districts. And there was a lot of discussion about these examples. Well, what about this? The incidental signs are basically for non-commercial signs, and the municipalities range anywhere from 3 square feet to 6 square feet. The most popular one is 4. And it's for any signs, like if I live at my home, I could put up a private parking sign, warning against trespassing, that I have a dog, warning that I have a dog in my backyard, an address sign, my name. I think this was even brought up with a boulder with a name kind of etched into it. And then now I did a drive-through Bel Aire. Multiple neighbors have signs for where Amazon should leave their packages. So that's popular now too. And that is making its way into municipalities. They're adding those as incidental signs that you do not need to go in and fill out a permit. You don't need to go into your city building. You don't need to provide site plans. But what's governing it is how much square feet is going to be used for those incidental signs. And like I said, the smallest I saw was 3, the biggest I saw was 6, but the popular one is 4. Just looking at these 3 things, the government signs, the flags, and the incidental signs in residential zoning districts, does anyone in the council have questions or concerns about these 3 items so far?
You're talking about the size of signs. Can we limit the total size of signs? So if you have 8 2 square feet signs, that's too much, but if you have 5, it's okay?
No, we absolutely can. We, are you talking about like the private parking or the where to leave packages?
I
or-
don't care what the sign is. I'm just envisioning, I've seen
Okay.
yards before that were just full of signs. And so is there some limit we could place on that?
Right.
Well, it's a
No.
political season.
Yeah, a lot of municipalities, and when I say a lot, I can think of at least a handful where they are saying 1 per lot or 1 per frontage road. For example, some houses, their front yard is going to be at the corner where they're facing 2 parts of the road, so they would get 2. Whereas the others who only have 1 would only have 1 sign. So we could definitely include that. I can add that. Is there like a little bit of consensus as to I should?
Well, I think
Keep it
is what you're asking. I just want to make sure I understand the concern. The concern would be that you had 1 person that had a sign for private parking and no trespassing and danger from animals and an address sign and their name and Amazon, please leave your package here. You have just maybe dozens of incidental signs, which starts to maybe not be within the spirit of what you're
It
trying
just
to.
looks like clutter at that point.
Isn't that an HOA problem?
Only if you live in an HOA.
That's what I mean. I don't legislate that.
I'm just, my suggestion would be we limit total 10 square feet or some random number like that. So, if somebody got prolific, we could use that limit to go out there and say, you got to take some of these down. You got too many. You pick which ones you want to take down.
Maria, I was just going to chime in and say, I don't, it makes me just nervous heading down that road. I like what you talked about with limiting the individual size so it's less visible from the road. But to Greg's point, if you choose to live in HOA and this concerns you, I'd prefer them doing this than the city government doing it. And I did have one question on Mayor's concern about obscenities. Do you see that getting us in trouble at any point in terms of speech, if it did become an issue? I know you said, like he mentioned the Supreme Court. It's you can't really define it because it's subjective to people.
True. And I've only seen a few municipalities even include it.
Yeah.
But when they do include it, they're basically taking the language itself verbatim about what they know of it. They're just basically giving residents notice to avoid it. I guess that's the only benefit of it, is just telling residents, by the way, remember, please don't do this.
And just to be clear, where my concern is, I obviously don't want somebody to put up a pornographic sign, but people can stretch language about what's obscene. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Other municipalities, and this would be for another stage, are much more quick when they remove signs. If they see an issue with the sign, whether it's dilapidated or whether they question something, they move much more quickly when it comes to contacting the owner, sending them the letter, sharing the concern about that sign, and then asking owner to remove it. And if owner doesn't remove it, then they have very quick moving features as to the enforcement officer or the zoning enforcement officer going to that homeowner and removing the sign. Ours is actually not quick moving, which is fine. But in situations like that, the bigger jurisdictions, the bigger municipalities, they're just trying to monitor what those, whether or not some of those messages are obscene or not. But I will say, as far as the clutter, there was a municipality, and they specifically wanted a blight-free zone. They didn't want any clutter. They knew that in prior cases, that as long as you focus on property values, minimize clutter, that you're trying to maintain safety. The court said that that's just not enough, that it needs to be more. It can't just be about avoiding clutter. It has to be more involved. So I totally respect the fact that everyone's trying to avoid having too many signs, a windy day, picking it all up, and then just blowing it into the next door neighbor's trash. But just so you know, the courts do expect everyone to be able to use signs for their messages, for their expression. But what I have right now, based upon your comments, is some options. Either keep it to a minimum of 3 square feet or a maximum amount of square feet.
You put a
Right.
minimum on there?
I have a minimum of 3 square feet. And then I wasn't sure, because I know that John had mentioned maybe we have a maximum amount of square feet for incidental signs.
I would almost think just put a maximum. Minimum. I don't think it's.
I wouldn't
there's
put a
reason.
minimum, because your Amazon here sign's gonna be really small, I hope.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm not sure I'd put a minimum on it.
And in terms of a maximum, I don't like the idea for both enforcement and just in general about having like a maximum total when you add all the sign, each individual sign footage up. I like the idea of saying you can't have a sign bigger than 3 or 4 foot. And that's where we help limit the visibility from the road or wherever.
Yeah, I think at this point I probably don't support that like maximum of number of incidental signs or adding all the square footages together. I think if somebody's going to have 10 incidental signs, then they're going to have 10 incidental signs.
And I'm not seeing us having an issue with that.
I'm
I
not
mean,
either.
if we start developing an issue, maybe we have to
Then we can revisit
revisit that. But that's not an issue. And I know some of the other things we don't have issues with either. But some of those things that once the cat's out of the bag, you got a can of worms. But yeah. So.
All right, that was actually the easy part. This next one's going to be tougher. We continue the exemption list. What are possibilities? There are municipalities that have an exception for temporary decorations or displays on private property, and then it's silent. You might be wondering, well, what about time? What about place? What about manner? I've read about a few One municipality did say, as far as temporary decorations, and it could be a holiday, it could be a festivity, it could be anything involving Kansas City Chiefs, you don't know. But these temporary decorations, one municipality put a time limit on it of 90 days. Others had nothing. It could be Christmas time, it could be something else. So we have no idea what those temporary decorations or displays could be. But if you do put some type of a restriction on it, it could be the 90-day, it could be less. And then with one municipality that said 90 days, it said that they would need to be removed and then potentially replaced. So maybe they'll take down the seasonal decorations and then they'll replace it with something else. But that's the only thing that I can offer. If you're going to put some type of a restriction, it would be about the time. Now, I do know as well, there was one specific neighborhood that had temporary decorations or displays on private property. It was Christmas. They went all out. They had a ton of decorations, and maybe the neighbors didn't like it, but the only exemption was temporary decorations, and they were using that. When Christmas came, it was approximately a week so later, they had everything put up. But that's something to take into account.
I don't know. I'm almost thinking in terms of what Greg suggested. Maybe this is more of an HOA type of issue. I don't know that we really want to limit temporary signs other than just say, hey, you're allowed to have them and not getting any more in the weeds than that. I don't know if anybody else has any
Right
ideas
now,
about it.
right now, I think our code would prohibit them.
Yeah, I think right now officially you'd have to go pay a $50 fee to get
That was
that
my
sign.
concern when I originally
Right.
brought this up.
And I think we need to address that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then I think the question is, how do we define temporary? Because if we do require permanent, then what is temporary?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, to the Christmas example, what's a sign? If I have an 8-foot Santa Claus out there, is that a sign or is that a decoration? And is it under a different clause?
Santa Claus.
Well, and just so you know that you don't have to include that. These are just after looking at other municipalities, getting an idea as to what they've included with their exemptions.
So
This was one.
So
if we don't include this and we're silent on temporary signs, what does that mean?
Then if they're going to, well, I'll include Wichita. They have the temporary decorations or displays. It doesn't say about how long that they can have those. And it doesn't go much further. I think I saw some language about seasonal decorations, but everyone just expects that you're going to have those. We're not going to make you come in and go and fill out a permit to tell us that you're going to have this many artificial trees outside. You're going to have this wire Christmas tree outside. I think they were thinking about, they have a large population that like some go way out, so much so that there's buses that take you on tours to some of those locations. And they expect you to understand, we don't think that those should be out 6 months of the year. Those are strictly temporary. I think that's where that intent came from.
I think if we need to define temporary, I'd say 90 days would be adequate in my mind. I mean, I can't imagine somebody putting a temporary sign out for that long, but maybe there's a reason.
Then you're not, the last
Maria,
conversation.
I had a quick question. What other examples of temporary signs do you have other than sort of like holiday decorations or displays? Like, would yard of the month signs fall into that? Like, what other common examples could people watching take of that?
It would be the
Asking for
bottom
Fred.
two. It would be the bottom two. So here's a popular example. Temporary signs, example number 1. A sign constructed of cloth, canvas, light fabric, cardboard, wallboard, or other light materials with or without frames. They are intended to be displayed for a short period of time, not to exceed 3 to 4 square feet in total area. They may be posted for 90 days, removed or replaced, 1 per yard or 2 per frontage street. That is absolutely used in municipalities across the state. Now, I provided a second example because the second example allows signs to get a little bit bigger. The second example says temporary signs in residential district and that a permit is not required if the principal use of the property is residential and it does not exceed 8 square feet and 4 feet in height. So you see a difference here. One is going to be less square feet and also it's silent as to time. But not to say any of these are right or wrong. Every local municipal government gets to look at what they see. They're trying to be as content neutral as they can. And this is what they're coming up with. I just know that last year when you were having these conversations, you're wondering, what are the others doing and what can we do? You can even change it a little bit for whatever you want to proceed with.
We require this to be on private property too, right?
Correct.
How many
That
square,
keeps it from obscuring the street.
how many square feet are those like really long happy birthday signs that people put in their front yards?
They can get at
12
least
12 feet.
15 feet. Banners, yeah.
That's one of the pictures up there, and I see them all the time.
Well, let me show you this. Balloon signs and banner signs are very popular. And we're not going to talk about birthdays or graduation. We're just looking at the manner of the sign. The balloon signs, when I looked at those, they are requiring permit applications. Why? Because some of these can go from 150 to 200 square feet. And when neighbors are together, and if the lots are small, some neighbors want a setback. Some neighbors don't want to see it. Some neighbors don't want it very close to the new seed that they put in their front yard. But the fees are very low, 15 to 25, and ours would be 0. But for balloon sign, they do have a time limit, and that'd be 5 days. For the banner, it's going to be a 30-day. And I'm almost wondering if that's because the balloons don't last that long, but for the banner, it's a 30-day average across the board. And it's running around 100 to 150 square feet. So these municipalities have put maximum on how big these signs can be. I'm sure if you go to anywhere, you can see that some of those balloon signs can be quite magnificent, but they do put a maximum amount of square feet.
Having trouble visualizing a banner sign.
Well, that would be your happy birthday or
I've seen the ones where you
congratulations.
put like the H is on a little stake and then the A is on a little stake. Just like one big long. Okay. I don't think I've seen anyone do that.
I haven't seen that. I don't even know what a balloon sign is, but I
Yeah, I
guess
was
I've
kind of
seen
wondering
them.
that too. What
I should
wanted an example.
Some balloon signs, they have like a metal awning and then they attach all these balloons to it and put pictures. I've seen it even for graduations and homecoming.
Sometimes they'll act as like an archway to walk through. Like it's a decoration and a sign.
So thinking about the temporary signs, the big question there is you want to have something to enforce if they left it there and it becomes dilapidated and it looks really bad. It's deteriorated.
That's right. You're also telling if a person is going to go ahead and put up a balloon sign, and if this is the standard, then at least the neighbors know, well, they're only going to have that for 5 days, that banner. They're only going to have it for 30 days max.
I think I like on this page when we're talking about temporary signs, I think I kind of like that middle section for temporary sign definition.
I have a question about that. What does it mean, 1 per yard or 2 per frontage road? That sounds like a person with a corner lot could have 4 signs.
Well, that's interesting. When I was looking at that, the intent is if you are on the street, then you would get 1. But if you're at the corner, and your home is facing two frontage streets, then you could have a sign facing each side. I guess you're at the corner of a neighborhood.
Yeah, but the way that reads, it sounds like you could have two on each street.
Okay, well,
If
no,
it's a
that was
total of
not the
four.
intent. No, you would only get one or two max. Mhm.
Yeah.
Right.
I
So-
read it the same way that you did, Mr. Mayor.
All right. I think if,
I-
I'm okay with the definition, but I think that would need to be clarified. What's that intent?
So is there some, I'm not asking for you to have an official vote, but is there more, is the first example more popular? Because when I put a proposal for all of you to see, I can focus on that one.
I can't really read any of that.
It's real hard to read it.
But what I
I
can
guess I
do,
lost the flow here. Do these cover political signs like campaign signs? Or is
No.
this just, I want to make a statement sign?
and you're right, you're trying to think a little bit about what's the content, what's the message on these signs going to be. All I can tell you is with our current code for political signs, and per statute, they can be in an unpaved right of way. Now, the only restrictions we put on those is that they should not affect the line of sight for pedestrians and drivers who are using the roadways.
Okay, well, I'm wondering about that because it sounds like I could only have one sign in my yard. And if I support 6 candidates, then I have to pick which candidate to support.
No, statute says you can have multiple political signs in your yard. This would only be, and what we could do is make a reference that these do not include political signs.
Well, and didn't that state statute override everybody's local laws 45 days ahead of time?
Right. And I didn't see very many municipalities that were trying to say something different, but if they did, you're absolutely right. The statute would control.
Yeah, the statute has, the way I think it reads, these are the minimum.
Mhm.
You-
And it has
you
a
have to
time.
do, and you can say, I'm going to allow political signs for 6 months. That would not be a violation of statute, but you can't say I'm only going to allow them for 30 days.
And it tells you when
So-
you can start
Right.
and when they need to be put away.
Thinking between the two options, there's that reference in the second one to residential districts. So does that first one saying businesses or whoever also?
They would both be residential.
Okay.
The second option, I literally took that wording from the municipality. So they actually wrote it in, but they're both for residential only.
The only other thing I'd say about option one is I don't know that I like favoring a corner lot owner over somebody along a street.
So it would be just consistent across the board for one.
They just feel like they pay double tax.
But yeah, that's what I was going to say. You got 2 streets and a sidewalk and everything else I got to pay for. So why don't I get a little special consideration?
What were the thoughts on the balloon and the banner? Any questions or?
I don't know, maybe, I don't know what others think about it. I almost think those are non-issues, but I don't know. I've not seen them very much and I just don't know.
I think they're not an issue till they're an issue,
Yeah.
like most things. I don't really like having, I don't think for a balloon sign or a banner sign, somebody should walk in and fill out a permit and pay a fee. That I don't think anybody's going to do that for one. If signs are just going to go up, I don't know that I'm opposed to having a different size and duration regulation for those, since they are kind of on a more grand scale. Having them be for a shorter duration probably makes sense.
I agree. I was actually going to suggest that why wouldn't you just, one, don't require a permit, don't require a person to pay, but make them both 10 days, both, not have them differentiated. A big banner or balloon of up to 200 square feet for 10 days, or make it some sort of standard for that
And
unique sign.
and not more than 2 or 3 times a year, something like that.
I don't know. I'm going to argue against this. If my neighbor puts up a sign that's 300 square feet, 200 square feet, I want to be able to put up a sign that's 200 square feet. I don't care what it's made out of. So 10 sheets of plywood instead of balloons.
Okay.
You don't just simplify it to
Large
one
sign.
sign, 10 days, 200 square feet.
Yeah, I want to simplify it to no more than a 3 square foot sign,
Oh.
which is what we started out talking about.
Yeah.
So then
I
we're
know
just
people
saying,
want to do this, but
so then we would just be saying no to this, or they could do the little sticks where each sign is okay, but you can't do one big piece.
you couldn't do any, string them all together. Yeah, I don't care if you put them on separate sticks. And honestly, I don't care if you put a banner that's 2 feet off the ground. But if you have a great big construction of something, I'm going to say that it's my right then to have a great big construction too. And I don't care what it's made out of, steel, aluminum poles, like a frame off of a portable garage. I can put up and hang anything I want on it. It could be sheets. It doesn't have to be balloons.
Yeah, we could just simplify the language and say large signs instead of calling them balloon or banner, but that would include large temporary signs.
Yeah, you could do that.
I'm
If
still
it's-
confused about signs versus decorations, like the big OU guy book or the Santa Claus or turkey, are those signs?
The only reason these are different is because of the manner. They're talking about a balloon or the banner. Everything else, it all comes down to time, place, and manner. But it is confusing because people are like, well, help me imagine, help me figure out what it is. And then that means we're trying to figure out what does it say.
So do you have legal definitions of these type of signs?
The definitions are literally, it'll say a sign made from balloons not to exceed 200 square feet, to be in a residential lot, 1 per lot, 5. I mean, you're literally seeing it because everyone is trying to avoid what do they say? What are they, what's the message being shared? It's even with the banner sign. I saw that in multiple municipalities when they were talking about the banner sign. The only thing they were talking about was time, place, and manner. And setbacks, because they can be so large to not have them right on their neighbor's property.
And I'm just thinking out loud here because I liked the idea of simplifying it, but my way around it was making it smaller so that no matter what it was, but if my neighbor wants to get a bleep you, Emily balloon sign, that can be really big. I mean, that's what I'm thinking through is like,
Yes.
what talk, can you kind of like help us think through that? Where we might be opening a can of worms, but I don't want to limit people for this, but we can't talk about content.
No, what I think I'll do is I'm going to show you some ordinances so you can see them, and then I'm going to pull up some pictures. It's not going to help you make a decision as to based upon looking at them, but I think just seeing why they're using site plans, why they're seeing applications, when you look at the proportion of some of these signs, I think it might help you a little bit as to figure out why those were pulled out. And those aren't the only ones. Balloon and banner, there's also specifics about the feather signs. They're tall, and I can bring a picture of that. They're feather signs. They blow in the wind. Some people are like, I don't like how that looks. It appears so tall, and they're very popular. They get just like that, John.
The waves,
But
the wave signs, yeah.
I'll bring that so you can see it. I appreciate that.
Can we regulate a distance? That if the sign is over certain square feet, it has to be within so many feet of your house? That would, kind
The
of keep
only-
it out of the neighbor's purview so much.
The only thing that I saw was making sure that it was not a certain distance from the neighbor near their windows. Some people don't want to see that when they look out their window, but I will go and get more information for that so you can see some more examples. The other thing that you all talked about last year were illuminated signs. There was a conversation about lumens, nits. How can we monitor this? Who do we have to come and measure the amount of light given off? How do we protect the residents around it? Well, this is how some municipalities are taking care of it. They're saying if you're going to have a temporary illuminated sign, I'm thinking fireworks, I'm thinking places coming in just for a short amount of time, that those can be only within 200 to 250 feet of a residential zoning district. They even talk about the time that that sign can be illuminated. One municipality went even further to say that they're going to have an automatic shut-off mechanism to make sure, because one could forget. These municipalities are trying to think about the residents of it going into their home, of it blaring, especially at night. But I know that the council last year said, well, how do we do this? Well, these are some options. That is my final slide. I think I have very good direction on where to go with the severability clause, starting an exemption list, bringing more ordinance examples regarding the balloon sign and the banner. And I'll provide a couple of options for the illuminated signs too. This is just the first step. The next time we'll have to talk a little bit more about the dilapidated signs, when to remove the signs, and we'll just have to go little by little. And the only reason I suggest and encourage that is because we don't want to do something quickly, hastily, and get ourselves into any type of troubles.
So these are just residential signs. That's all we've been talking about.
That's what
tonight.
we've been
Not
talking about.
Talking anything about commercial business signs.
That's what I was gathering from your discussion
Mhm.
last year. Is
Right.
really, it was focusing on residential.
The only thing that kind of bled into the discussion last time was temporary signs for nonprofits and businesses and how those are or are not regulated. For example, one of the churches in towns puts up a sign that says Fall Festival this weekend or Fish Fry tonight, temporary signs out by the road, potentially in public right of way or even on their private property. Or
blood
people will put
drives.
up temporary signs for, hey, the 5K run is this way or that way, those types of things.
I'm glad you brought that up because I looked into that too. It appears as though the process for that right now are special event permits. I don't know if everyone's using them on a regular and consistent
Probably
basis, but that was the process.
Do nonprofit organizations, churches, schools need to get a permit in order to hold an event at their establishment?
The only other example that I saw was, I think there was some type of a Red Cross blood drive, and they did not go through the whole process, but I think they made a phone call and talked to somebody here and made arrangements. But ultimately, everything has been encouraging the special event permit process. What I can do is I can go and find out a little bit more about that. So when I come back, but the other thing that I was focusing on were the ones on the slides. It's a lot of information. It's a lot to take in. Anything else you can think that you want me to look into?
Well, the reason I do have a small concern on business signs, and I don't want us to confuse the two issues, but a lot of municipalities have started limiting the height of business signs. They can't put them way up in the sky, okay? They have to be, maximum height is 5 feet or whatever. I don't know what it is, but I see that often. And I think when you put those high signs in, you see them some places around. There are some municipalities around here that have them, and they do look a little bit cluttered and junky. I think it would be nicer if we made some statement about that. But I don't know what that statement should be. And I guess, but it's, like I said, it's not residential, so I don't want to confuse the two issues.
All right, I'll add that. Thank you, Mayor. Anything else? Well, thank you.
Well, very good. Thank you for working on that, and look for more information in the future. Okay. Do we have other issues we need to discuss tonight?
Mr. Mayor, I've got one thing I
Yes.
would like to. Something I'd like to pass out. This is not a surprise. It's something we talked about, but I've set my retirement date.
Oh,
So
Finally decided you had enough of us, huh?
we're going to refuse that.
So, no, it's what we agreed on, 6 months. And so I want to give that to tonight so you can think about it. I'm sure you want to have some meetings or have some discussions and talk about a transition plan. But as we agreed upon, there's 6 months, so my last day will be the end of March. So
End of March.
yes.
Wow. Yeah, that's what it is. It's the April Fool's joke. That's all he intended to be, just that. Just an early April
Just
Fool's
got his
joke.
in first.
But yeah, I like I said, if you have time to read it tonight, or I meant everything in there I said, and it's, there comes a time when change is good, and I think it's good. I think it's time, and I think the election will be over, and so you'll have be able to make a decision and work on a transition plan. So.
All right. Well, sorry to see that, although it was not totally unexpected. It just didn't expect it now.
Well, yeah.
Been ignoring it for more than a year. and it
Yeah.
kinda snuck up on us.
Time flies when you're having fun. So.
Yeah. Well, you don't want to stick around and have more fun, huh?
It's time for somebody else to enjoy the fun. So.
Yeah. Well, we certainly appreciate your giving us this information, even though it's not necessarily what we want to see, but it's there. So,
And like I said, I'll be working, happy to help in any way I can with the transition. And if you've got a good staff, so I'm not worried.
yeah, I am. So, well, we're obviously not going to discuss that tonight, but I do think that we do. I don't know if it's appropriate to do that workshop, or is it more appropriate for those to be in executive session because they are elected personnel? Be best executive
Probably
sessions.
a workshop first, wouldn't you think? Because we got to decide what the process is to fill the position.
No, you're right, John. We could do that. I don't know if you want to do that next month.
Well, we need to do. We can't delay on it too long. I mean, I know he's giving us 6 months, but before you know it, that's gonna be 1 month.
I think overlap is going to be ideal there.
Right,
So
right.
we need to start that recruiting and the process and whatever we're going to do there promptly. So
Should we maybe follow some ideas?
We're
Maybe
gonna end
plan
up
executive
talking-
session next Tuesday and maybe for 20, 30 minutes just to kind of talk about the process, come out what we're going to do. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And I don't know if anybody has a preference on how much time that is, but I think that might be the right thing to do. At
Yeah.
least to start it. Okay. Okay. Well, I'm not going to ask if there's anybody else, other ideas that we need to talk about.
Look what that got you.
I don't want to talk about it tonight, but I would like to go back and revisit our decisions on how what to do with roads after we have traffic studies. Whether or not we really want to spend $10 million on 45th Street, or if we want to do a more simple fix that'll get us through another 10, 15 years.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of with you with some of that. It's unfortunate this one bit us a bit, and I hope we don't end up
Well,
spending a lot of money on it.
we're talking about 45th and 53rd, and we're talking about a new road up there in that industrial park, but I guess that we're not paying for that, but we'd still have to be involved in doing it. And we're talking about Rock Road and Webb Road, and we got a lot of roads to talk about.
Yeah,
and
there are.
not a lot of money in the bank right now.
Yep, that's right.
Mr. Mayor,
you
I was
just
just going to
laughed.
say, John's comment when Ken was here last time kind of did stick with me. I would like further discussion on that too.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing to discuss, and think about other options, those paved ditch options might be something to just acknowledge that they're there. I'm not saying we need to do them. I'm not saying we shouldn't do them. I just know they're out there. So, yeah. Okay. Would you need to bring some folks in to talk about that, or what's your thought on that?
Yeah, what I might do is Ken Lee, they're engineering 53rd Street, which is 2 million or somewhere in that neighborhood. And they've also been working on engineering 45th to be like Woodlawn, of 3-lane.
Well, we hope it's not like Woodlawn.
Well, yeah, sorry. That's a bad example. That's probably, yeah. But ask him, what would it take? What would happen if we did what we're doing on 53rd to 45th? Would it be a similar cost? What would it look like? And maybe have him talk about that.
That's good.
When will we have the traffic studies done? I forgot what date that was scheduled for.
Yeah, I don't remember when they were going to do that.
I think they were looking at not doing it until November because of the Oliver work and the
Yeah.
Woodlawn work, and
I
they
think
wanted to
that's
try to
right.
get those roads back working, functioning the way they're supposed to function.
So
Right.
that'll be next month then.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's another one of these things we keep putting off. It's gonna sneak up and bite us.
No, they need to get it done.
So,
Yeah. But I think that's what was discussed when we
right.
initially hired it.
Well, and we need to know because WAMPO is calling for projects and we were going to put 45th in. And if we don't, if we're not going to do that, then
But
there's
it's
no
already
need
on
to-
already on the tip, isn't
It's there, but the funding piece, we're going to request funding for it,
it? Yeah.
which will be the 15 million or whatever that price is.
Part of what we need to discuss
Yeah.
is how much money Bel Air would be putting out to get that project versus what we'd put out to do something different.
Yeah. Well, the normal ratio is 20% that we would put out of the construction cost plus the engineering costs.
Yeah.
But
And understand if it's a not to exceed amount.
yeah, that one bit us badly. I still got bad taste in my mouth about the way that came down, but yeah. All right.
Okay, I've caused enough trouble tonight.
Okay. All right. Well, if there's nothing else to discuss, I will call an end to the meeting and everybody have a good evening and we will see you next